Hey, we're trying something new here. We've established an interfaith dialogue in this conversation. We brought together people from various churches around the Dallas area that are specifically Indian churches. We're hoping to see more unity established in this community in years to come. I hope you enjoy this conversation. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for being here for our first ever interdenominational panel from various churches from our Kerala, South Indian St. Thomas churches. And my name is Alex. I'm honored that you guys are here. If we just want to go around and do a quick intro of everyone before we start, I would love to hear what church you're from, your involvement, maybe how long you've been there. So yeah, we'll start.
Cool, I'll start. My name is Nisha. I go to Calvary Pentecostal Church in Richardson, and I serve as our girls ministry lead as well as on our worship team.
Cool. I'm Joel. I go to St. Mary's Malanga Catholic Church in Mesquite. I've been at the church for about 18 years now, so it's been a while. I am pretty involved, and I'm currently the national president of our eparchy for North America.
My name is Jeevan. I go to the Margam Church of Dallas Farmers Branch, out in Farmers Branch. I've been there probably my entire life, since '96, and I am currently just a nice 12th grade Sunday school teacher.
Hi, I'm Christina. I go to the St. Thomas here in Marlborough Catholic Church. I'm a Sunday school teacher, and I just help out with different youth, young adult ministries.
My name's Chris Matthew. I attend St. Gregorio's Oriental Orthodox Church, and at church I serve as a Sunday school teacher and for our young adult ministry as well.
And I'm Zebi. I go to St. Ignatius Malankara Jacobite Syriac Orthodox Church. It's in Carrollton. I serve as an altar server. I teach 8th grade, and I'm a youth advisor for our youth ministry.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for the introductions. Thank you so much for being here. My hope with this time, this recording, this podcast is that we will be able to shed light on each of our churches, because as all of us know, there can be a lot of division, there can be a lot of potential misunderstandings, misconceptions that end up driving our communities away from each other. And my hope is that we can seek unity, that we don't burn bridges, or that we build them, that we would be able to pave a new way forward for our future generations. And so, of course, not every church from India is represented in this circle, but this is just a few. And my hope is that we can just see more eye to eye with one another. So let's just jump right into my first question. And before we get into anything deep, theological, doctrine, church membership-wise, one of my questions is, why do you follow Jesus? Like, what does your life as a Christian really mean to you?
I can go first, yeah. I've thought about this recently just on my own, because I think your favorite Bible verse changes as you go through different seasons of life. So I updated my Instagram bio. Now it's John 15:11, and Jesus says, "I have told you these things so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be complete." And as I've gotten older, I feel like the world just lacks this joy. And then when you open the gospel and you read it, or you go to church, that joy should just take hold of you. And I want as many people to feel that joy as there are out there.
Yeah. So I think what I think about this is St. Augustine has a quote, "Our hearts are restless until they rest in you." So in my own life, just thinking that void could be filled in relationships or accomplishments, and then I realized that it's restless until it's with the Lord. So realizing the joy that the Lord provides has been why I follow him.
Yeah, I think for me, grew up very Christian family, right? I'm a Christian. I think the main thing was I had a really big issue with seeing suffering or pain, right? Especially your loved ones, like people that are good, and not like moral, like suffering, meaning like you did something wrong, like good people that suffer. And I think I really, really struggled with how, like, why would God allow this, and asking those kind of questions, and then going through the process of like free will and how that ties into suffering. And I guess Jesus is like redemptive suffering, right? That was a huge thing that made me relook, things that my own pain, or like things that my loved ones have suffered through. I saw the suffering in a different way, and I think Jesus gave meaning to that suffering, and so I think that's where I kind of found Jesus. And then throughout my life, I think I started seeing like examples of that, right? Whether it's you see someone else suffering and you learn something from that, or when you feel pain, right? There is a beauty in that. And yeah, so I think I found Jesus. I didn't think he was there when things were rough, but that's really where he kind of lit a spark in my life, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was thinking about this today during Kurbana, kneeling before the altar and taking like communion, and I was just sitting there before the altar and just was reminded of like, God, I am a sinner and I desperately need your hope. And that's been a season of my life that I've been going through a lot more. And it just points me to understanding like how much I need the salvation of Christ, how much I need the hope of Christ in my life day by day. And that's essentially why I follow him, because I cannot be in front of that altar without his hope. And so it was a good thing that I was able to like, just sit there and see God's presence in that way. But yeah.
I think very similar to a lot of you. I've, obviously grown up in the church, been instilled this faith from our parents and stuff, but the biggest thing I've always struggled with is perfectionism. And so through perfectionism, I've kind of now been humbled and realized that none of us is ever really perfect, but the most perfect human being ever to come on this earth was Jesus Christ. So through his works and through that teachings is why I follow him every day, because he is truly perfect. And if I want to be a fraction of what he is, I have to abide by him.
I would say my answer goes along with a lot of y'all's. I feel like I've just been reminded of joy and salvation. And the Lord just reminded me, I think like last week or 2 weeks ago, I was like wrecked by this one song in my car. That song just reminds me of like a time in my freshman year. I was at a very broken, low place in my life. I was very sad. And I remember I went to this retreat and it was like worship time. And again, it was a broken place, but I remember feeling like such an overwhelming peace and joy. And it was so unexplainable. And I was like, wow, like God, you're so good. Because I remember jumping in joy and dancing when I was at such a broken place. Like my situation didn't even matter because I served such a good God. And so I would say like he truly saved me, transformed me, and then continued to just reveal himself to me as I walk with him. And I continuously am just in awe and wonder of who he is.
Yeah.
That's why I follow him.
Yeah. It's powerful to hear everyone's connection, first and foremost, to Jesus, that our Savior is the pinnacle of our faith, that it's nothing before him. And yeah, thank you all for sharing that. I think especially in our context, all of us, our families are from Kerala, southwestern India. And Kerala has been a very important place to the history of Christianity globally since the first century. And so for all of us, we've heard the stories of the Apostle Thomas going to India in 52 AD. And basically all of our churches, all of us as Malayali people from Kerala, Christians, we date our faith essentially back to someone who heard about the faith from someone, and it goes all the way back to the first centuries. And so with all of that in the background, I would just love to hear a little bit more of your specific church and what keeps you there.
I'll go first. I'm Syrian Malabar Catholic. So again, brought up in this faith. My parents, grandparents, great, right? So for me, that's what brought me to my faith was my family. But I guess my own conviction to stay in Syrian Malabar Church, right, was I think I was at a point where I was deciding either I stay in this church and I practice and go to Kurbana and do my duty and show face, or I have to make a critical decision is whether I believe in any of this, like whether I even know what any of this means. And the reality was that it's easier to just be complacent or kind of just go with the flow of what you've been grown up in. And it's harder to actually do the research and study and question. Like that's really hard to question your upbringing, question your what your parents have given you. But I think for me, I had so much older Chechi chaplain support within my community, within my church specifically, which is what kept me to continue to stay at my church while alongside educate myself on my own faith that I was given. I think it's a gift to be given a faith and be born into Christianity, being born into St. Malabar Catholic Church, right? But then I think there's a beauty in taking ownership of your own faith, like taking responsibility for your faith. And I think that's kind of where I'm at, is I'm so happy and joyful to learn on my own, what I've been given. Yeah.
I can go next, yeah. So I go to St. Ignatius Jacobite Church in Carrollton. We're celebrating our Golden Jubilee next year. So 50 years we've been in Dallas, and my uncle is one of the founding members, and I've grown up in the church. And I think one of the really cool things in Orthodoxy, and I'm sure other traditions, is as a child, what I connected with was the sights and the sounds and the smells. So even though I couldn't necessarily process intellectually what the Qurbana was or what was happening, the songs and the tones, even though I have no musical talent, I wanted to sing along and do what I could. And as I got older and, like Christina said, like explored the faith on my own, I think I came to appreciate just how my church and the Orthodox Church teaches and explains all these things. And specifically in the Syriac tradition, there's a lot of symbolism and imagery. So if those are like literary devices that you're drawn to, I kind of fell in love with it, for lack of a better word. And I love to just explore, and I feel like it's never ending, and it supplements when I open the Bible, and then I go to the church, and it just paints a fuller picture. So for me, that's why I've always stayed. And even though some of my friends have left, and that's a challenge we might share, I could never see myself leaving, because I feel like I have the truth here, and it's got everything I need, and I want other people to know about it.
Yeah, that's powerful.
Yeah, I ditto on that. Like, I think I have had mentors and Utchins just be able to pour in so much over the last few years. I grew up as a Martha my entire life, but I go into church really not knowing what was happening most of the time. It wasn't probably until college, late college, maybe right after college, that I really started actually appreciating being there once it all finally came to like a full picture for me. And so I stay there because I've seen like so many people pour into me in so many different ways. The kids keep me there right now just to be able to serve them in either youth or Sunday school, and just being able to know that, hey, I have this light of Jesus that needs to be shared, and I have this area of people I can share it with, and it's just been that running through me for a while now.
Yeah.
I think I can go next. I think the church, to me, like, I've always served, I've always been part of it. So that's honestly never changed, and it's been very like strongly instilled into me from so many different people. But I think right now, at least, maybe this will change, but what keeps me really tied down is the community. So a little bit about me, I'm from India. Most of my first like cousins, everyone is in India. And right now, like, to me, the first like cousins that I could even call family, or people that I call family, are the people at my church. And so I think over the years as college and things have happened, I've found different homes now. I have churches in Philadelphia, I have churches in New York, churches in Houston. And so these different pods of families that I've kind of met, developed, grown into loving, I know that I love them, and I know that if I go anywhere in the United States, at least, I'm always going to be welcomed. And so that's the biggest thing that keeps me rooted into my Dallas Syro-Monoglot Catholic Church.
I would say, so I go to a Penty church, like I said, and I'm born and raised in this church. And so for a long time, this is all I kind of saw, right? But then I did explore the faith myself, went into scripture, and I think I just really appreciated how our pastors would just teach and go into the word and keep Jesus at the center of everything. And then just the structure and of our church, or changes we make, is always based off prayers or what they hear from the Lord. And so I think I just always admired that. And then also with what he said, community, like, it's always just been such a family at my church, like a true family that sharpens you and is always there for you, and there to pray. And so that's what's always kept me.
Yeah, so I think for me, I've had the opportunity to see some really historical churches. And I think one thing that stuck out to me is, like, when you go to these churches and you think about your own anxiety, you're like, dang, how many generations of people complained about what was going on in their lives and found joy here. And it was just the cloud of witnesses, the idea that the faith once delivered, it's been happening for a while. And so that really stuck out to me, and I think what I stay for in the Orthodox Church is the idea that Christianity isn't something we make up for ourselves. It's been passed from the beginning, and so I find what I enjoy about it is this idea that we have a line, we have an idea of what they had taught, and that stuck out to me. And so being rooted in that, I think, is cool because there's only so much I know myself, but it's like I don't need to figure it out. I don't need to know every single thing. It's the faith that was delivered, and I can learn to accept that. So I find that to be what keeps me grounded in my faith.
Yeah. It seems like community is pretty central to everyone's story. That people that know you, people that are willing to walk alongside you is probably one of the most important things. There's some interesting statistics about Indian Christians. So there's roughly over 1,500 Indian churches across the U.S. and into Canada. So that's Catholic, Orthodox, Margam, Pentecostal, various traditions. And so that also points that there's over 1 million Indian Christians in our country. But something that I know that most of us have experienced is also the reality that we're Indian, we're American, and we're Christian. And so in this society where our churches may look different than our friends' churches, that we might have a service in a different language than our friends would understand, how have you navigated being an Indian American Christian today here in Dallas?
I think the first thing, and this also depends where you grew up. So within Dallas, there are suburbs that are very Indian. I grew up in not one of those. So me, my brother, my sister were really the only Malu people in my community. And so it's always like, I remember going to this VBS that one of my friends invited us to. And I don't know if my parents really understood what it was, but their dad was a pastor and they invited us. And then I remember going to that and coming back, and my mom picked us up. And then that friend's mom was like, I don't know if you're Christian, and I'm sorry, like, if that wasn't clear. And she said, oh, no, we're a Christian. We grew up in the church. We go to an Orthodox church. And then everyone is like very shocked. It's like, what is Orthodoxy? How do you know about Jesus and all these kinds of things? And I remember as I got older, and I would say this is very relevant now, we are in a very unique place because people look at us and they assume one thing, and we can be a voice for people who are judged, and there's a lot of discrimination and things against, and because we look like them, but we're more like the people who are being judgmental and discriminated. Yeah. And so I feel that a lot, especially in college with different, the ways people talked about different groups and immigration, all these things. We can be a voice for those people and be like, we're a product of immigration too, and we're like you, but we're like them too, and we should all be able to get along. Yeah. So that's one thing that I thought God blessed us with, and has called us to use our voice to be advocates for people who look like us but may not be like us. And so that's one aspect.
That's powerful. That's good.
My story is a bit more silly, but there's already kind of a divide culturally between like an Orthodox church and like more evangelical church. So I grew up in a very evangelical area. I was like, I don't even know how I'm going to explain my church to you. Like, I don't even know where to start. Like, it's like we have like bells and stuff, and I was like, our like Achin, our priest wears like this this cape. He wears a cape to church. I was like, I have no idea. And I think what made it hard is like, you can't serve two masters. It has to be Christ, Monday through Saturday and on Sunday. But it's like you're entering two different worlds. Right? It's like, so as a kid, I think that was interesting because it's on Sunday, you're a Malayali, and also you're a Christian. And Monday through Saturday, you're an American, right? So it's like, is Christianity a Malayali thing for me? Or is it, how do I bring what I have and then have it every day? Yeah. So as a kid, like, that was something that I just, a different world, right? I was like, I'll just live my secular life, and but I had to learn I had to bridge the gap as I get older, right? It can't be two different worlds. So that was always something that was interesting. I was like, if someone wanted to come to my church, I was like, So I was like, I don't even know what, like, we have two gaps. We have a cultural gap and we have like a religious experience gap, right? We have two gaps I'm trying to like divide. So as I've grown older, I've like worked on that and I've been able to work, but that was something as a kid that was a lot harder.
Yeah.
Same experience as a kid. So for middle school only, I went to a Catholic school, and you would think, I'm Catholic, right? So you would think I would be just like everyone else, but I think I had a unique experience being Syro-Malabar Catholic at a Roman Catholic school, right? And for the longest time, I genuinely thought that like, okay, we're Catholic and we pray the rosary and we do all these things, but like they're like they're not really Catholic, they're just something else. And then I come to this middle school and then I'm like, oh, you guys like do the same thing. And I was like, I had a culture shock because the longest time I thought being Catholic, because I was Syro-Malabar Catholic, I thought it was just a cultural Malayali thing, and it was really hard for me to come to terms with the fact that there are people that are not Malayali that pray the rosary or do things like. So I think for me, as a kid, I just assumed that my religion is my cultural experience and my cultural. What brings my family, what ties us to Kerala, what ties us to our Malayali family, And as I grew up, I guess I realized, there could be, there could be a harmony in the church, right? I could be a proud American, be a proud Malayali, be a proud Catholic, and be a proud Syro-Malabar Catholic all at my church. Like it's not just because I'm Malayali, right? So. But yeah, it's funny. Like when you're a kid, you kind of just see things as like, okay, this is Malayali, this is American white church, and then that was kind of my experience.
Yeah.
I couldn't even get to the question about a cape or talking about it because it was always hard as a kid or even today saying we are Thoma. And like if I was Catholic or Orthodox, I feel like it's so much easier to explain to somebody. But I think I spent like 5 minutes trying to get someone to understand what the word Thoma was, or at least what it even means.
Yeah.
Right. And so that was always kind of like the harder part about growing up. But I feel like it got pretty easy after that. Because then, I grew up in Plano, and Plano is filled with Indians. And it was a unique upbringing because you had like a lot of the Southern Baptist culture influence, but you also had a lot of Indians there, and God gave us this very unique place to be able to kind of leverage both parts of that identity, being able to be Christian and understand who Christ is, and also being able to tap into the cultural aspect of it. And going to Plano School is just so unique because I got to really see how those worlds kind of come together. And I carried that with me throughout like college and even now today. But again, just getting to the Marthama question was always like the hard part. After that, it was nice and easy.
Very similar to what Christina said. I also had the privilege of going to a Catholic school around middle school. That's really when I even like kind of spoke about being Malankara Catholic. And even when I say it, I'm like, it's Malankara, not Malankara. It's you changed it for them, and then. I was like, why am I doing that? That's not how we even say that. So that's kind of how that started in middle school. And then in high school, I was like, nah, this is who I am. I'm Catholic. And then they're like, how are you Catholic? How is that possible? Like, you're Indian? Okay. But even beyond that, I've had the privilege of being part of an organization called World Youth Day, or an event called World Youth Day. It's a global initiative where all Catholics come, and it was a couple years back. It was in Portugal. And so even my own understanding changed, like expanded. I met so many different kind of Catholics, not just Indian Catholics. And so it's been an interesting journey, and I'm here for the ride.
I guess for my answer is more like a personal, like what I had to learn, like being Indian American Christian. Like I had to really differentiate between culture and like what's scripture, because I feel like growing up, it was always taught to me like, don't wear jewelry, don't wear makeup, don't dye your hair, like don't do tattoos, like this is all against the Bible, And so I feel like I had to do my own research, go through scripture and be like, am I putting culture on a pedestal, or am I actually following what Jesus wants and pleasing him? So I feel like that's something I had to learn. Which
Yeah.
was a journey for me too. But yeah.
Yeah, I think just kind of staying on the same topic of the culture compared to our faith, we've seen various initiatives started. We've seen people, really try and get more youth engaged because whether we see it or not, whether we like it or not, millennials, Gen Z, and Generation Alpha are the next generation up, and maybe they don't relate anymore to speaking in Malayalam or hearing their Kurbana in different languages, or there could be so many potential roadblocks in these churches that may eventually lead people to leaving the church, and that's not the goal. And I think there's work to be done, but maybe in your own specific context, what kind of positive things have you seen, or maybe things that you wish you could see in your church that would allow people, whether they're younger, don't understand the language, or whether they're from the outside, not even Indian, to come into your church? How can we put the hurdles down to make it easier for people to understand the faith in your own church?
My church recently, when did we do this? Maybe like 2-3 years ago. We kind of separated our Malayalam and English service. So when we have non-Indians come, they have the option to come for the English service. So our English service starts at like 11:15. Then we have like Malayalam worship at 10. It's 10 o'clock for Malayalam, and then we have Sunday school. And so a lot of people who are non-Indian, they'll come for Sunday school, meet people, and then go to our English service. But they end up coming to our Malayalam because they meet people. It's not coming just like uncomfortable, I guess, but they end up loving the culture. So that's something I love that my church did, that it just invited a lot more people rather than them coming and not knowing the language and then never coming again. But yeah.
I think
You go ahead.
I think I'm a product of that change being implemented. And so growing up, one of the experiences that I like vividly remember is like in liturgy, I'm like completely zoned out. I have zero recollection. And then a priest would come down for the homily, the sermon, and he spoke English like I spoke English. And he was a priest who grew up in America. And so for me, like from a young age, I was able to see I belong here, right? And it's like I guess he may not have realized at the time, but he didn't know any Malayalam. He still doesn't, right, that priest. But he stayed in the church and he played that part. And so for as a young kid, that was so huge for me because I don't remember anything from liturgy when I was a kid, but I remember his sermon, or at least how it made me feel, because I felt like I was like, oh, this is tapping into another part of me. And from there, even now, the priest that serves at my church is born and raised in America. A lot of work has been done at our own churches. We're here, we're going to take up space, and we're going to make this work. So my church, for our prayers, we do half English, half Malayalam, or we'll have English one week, Malayalam the other week, and everything's been translated to English. So by God's grace, like I feel like I didn't have to do the hard work. Someone had done it for me and brought it in. So I would say, like, from what I've seen, it's take up space, like believe in what you believe in, and trust that the Lord will provide, and that the work that you do will produce something good. Because our Sunday school is now taught by mostly people who grew up here, right? And that's a beautiful thing. So, I even had maybe some uncles and aunties who did their best, but I could not fully relate to them. But now our students have people they relate to. So work can be done with time, and so I think that's beautiful.
You mentioned like how the Gen Z, millennial, like a lot of people are leaving the faith that grew up here, right? And it is sad, right? Because that generation, they didn't get the privileges that I got, right? I also got for Sri Marlborough Catholic Church. We have the English Kurbana as well as the Malayalam Kurbana, and I had a whole different experience in the English Kurbana than I did in the Malayalam Kurbana. The Malayalam Kurbana, the Malayalam language it's beautiful in general, the music and the singing, how they sing the hymns and stuff. But in the English Kurbana, I can actually understand and like, I can be fully present in Kurbana, which I'm so privileged to be part of that generation. But for that older generation that didn't have that privilege, I think it again comes back to the point of taking ownership for your faith, right? Taking responsibility for your faith. If we aren't gonna come back and pour into what we've I know some of them haven't received it, right? But if you don't pour into something, right, whether it's your communities, your churches, wherever, like nothing will change, right? And now we have the English Kurbana, we have the Malayalam Kurbana, but that only became because a couple people took that effort to be like, okay, we want this, we need this, you know? And it wasn't any issues with the like doctrinal issues or liturgy issues or anything with scripture, you know? It was all just a language barrier. We had that disconnect. And so I feel like our generation, if we really do put that effort in to pour into our communities, church, or any community, right? You will see the fruits of it. And I think English Kurbana or any of our English services, right, is the fruit of our generation. Like I do have a lot of hope for our generation that I think that older population lost, kind of, you know?
Yeah. To go off of what you're saying, but generational wise, I was actually very privileged to see. I wasn't born in Kerala, I was born in Pune. So my mom, she's from North India, she spoke mostly Hindi. So even beyond, or even behind my generation, my mom's generation, they spoke Hindi as Kurbana. Like Hindi was part of their Kurbana. So she came from that kind of background. When we moved to America, it was only second instinct for her to say, yeah, English has to be a priority. I don't even know Malayalam. How am I going to teach my kid Malayalam? Thankfully, like my grandparents were all involved in that process. But starting from that is how we've even grown. And I think today's generation, I think in the United States, the media is amazing. I'm part of different organizations, different events that really are promoting new translations of the English Kurbana, that are promoting like conversations over YouTube and different stuff like that. And I think being part of that today is just such a blessing. And I think so many Denominations have said it, but the youth is the future of the church. And I think we have to live by that. And I think that starts today.
Yeah.
Can definitely relate to that. I think we were talking about roadblocks. Like roadblocks only stay roadblocks for so long. And it's one thing I appreciate about it. Like our churches are, and it's obviously very like vibrant and happening in y'all's churches too. Is like if there's a need that needs to be addressed, like our churches address it. But if it's a need that is there to address the need for Jesus, right? There's like a faith issue that can happen if you don't address it. And I've always appreciated my church because like we have issues that come up all the time for all sorts of things, but our laity and our clergy are always like willing to, you know, look into it and see like how do we address this issue in the best way possible. Is it stopping their faith in some sort of way? Is it stopping them from growing in some sort of way? And so it's been pretty important in just seeing like that's a spirit that we have. Our church started on like the aspect of Reformation, like back in the early 1800s, and that spirit just still continues to remain in our churches day in and day out. And it's all solely just to see like, how can I love Christ more? And am I as a church, or are we as a church doing something that stops our youth from loving Christ more, knowing God more? It happens, but we address it.
Yeah.
I think to round out this question, my church is a very unique model. So we actually have kind of two separate buildings, and we have a concurrent Malayalam and English Kurbana. So this idea of prioritizing the language and culture that our kids and youth are growing up in. And, you know, we're very blessed to have the resources, the achins, enough people to have funded that. And that's not going to work everywhere. But I will say the fruit that I see that as an 8th grade Sunday school teacher is that gap of connection has changed. These kids are growing up in the church and they're invested in participating and becoming altar servers or joining the choir, asking really good questions in Sunday school. We had our youth elections today, and 4 of my 8th graders, they'd never been in youth league. They're like, I want to be secretary or whatever it is. And that's such a blessing. And I think now that it's shifted and it's on this generation that is that gap we're talking about, we need to step up and serve the youth and the kids and also our parents. Our parents came here with nothing. They prioritized, we need a church, and then we need a hall. We need to give all these, we need to build this community and this faith. But then the next generation, they didn't quite, they left for, like we've been talking about. Now these kids are looking at us like, we want to advance the church, but we're kids. We can't do that. And so it's amongst us to come back and say, what our parents have given us, we need to hand it to the next generation. We can't be the generation that drops it. And I think that's a calling that this here in America, we have privilege and we have so much that people have left the church, but there's so much more to being involved in the church, especially those who are depending on us. And I think that's really the call for this generation.
Yeah. So going off the same concept, so most of our churches, when you go, there's probably 99% of people can understand Malayalam or they hear it at home, and they're probably from Kerala. And so one of the potential downfalls of our churches is that they are homogenous, that they're for people that look like us, for people that are from where we're from, and they speak the language or they've heard it before. But if you talk to your friends, coworkers, peers, or any other American church down the street, there's probably more diversity, and there's probably people from various countries and backgrounds. And so one of the questions that I have for you guys is, what's your take on the homogenous church? Not, we don't have to get too far into it, but I've heard from a lot of people like, you go to these Indian churches and am I allowed to come? I'm not Indian. Or even if it's someone who is Indian and they're not from Kerala, can they come? How do you think we go about the concept of homogenous churches into the 21st century? Because the reality is, a large majority of our people in our churches may not marry someone who speaks Malayalam, may not marry someone who's from India or from the same denomination. Like, what do you think, from your perspective, could be a potential answer or a necessary change?
I think, if you look at all of our churches, there's so many adjectives, and we have to pick which one's the most important. And like mine, Malankara, Jacobite, Syriac, Orthodox, which of those 4 words is most important? I think if you ask my parent, or the perspective might be Malankara is the most important, or even Jacobite. But I would say Orthodox, because I'm an Orthodox Christian, that's the most important. And Orthodoxy, it transcends culture, languages, it's a shared faith. And that's the only way we can invite people in, because people can't put on clothes or change their appearance and become Malankara. But they can be Orthodox if they invest in learning about the church and decide this is where I believe the gospel is and where I see Jesus. But that's a shift that a generation has to make, because every other generation before this, especially coming to America, when our parents looked around, it's uncomfortable. We want to go where what's familiar to us. So they prioritize those other adjectives. And I think at least for me, I want to prioritize Orthodox identity in Christ.
Yeah, exactly. The earlier generations came to the U.S. for work. They came and they wanted to establish security and safety. And so the churches were a place where they could speak their language, eat their food, be with people who understood them at a deep level. But then we see the following generations, we don't necessarily need that anymore. And so that's like one of the biggest things why people may leave, because it's cultural. They're not doing what other churches do. Like, I've heard that from plenty of people from churches that you all are familiar with.
With Sierra Malvo specifically, obviously, like there's a Roman Catholic church like down the corner, right? Like they're everywhere, right? So for us, we only have 2 churches in Dallas and then 1 mission, and so it is a drive to go to Sierra Church, like a Sierra Malvo church, whereas Latin church is more common around the community. And so I guess when you look at our Indian churches, right, versus American churches and stuff like that, I think the main thing that if we focus on faith in Jesus, and if we focus on transforming people's hearts and instilling that, just like a small seed of faith and identity, I would say as well, in kids specifically, as they're growing up, they will identify themselves with, I am a Sierra Malvo Catholic, or I am this, and I can also be American, or I can also, have friendships or, relationships with people that are not Malayali, but I can still have this identity and this faith, because I think that like faith should transcend like ethnicity, like what geographical location, whatever. So like and above all that, right, love transcends all that, right? Like, and God is love, right? So if our churches are focused on that faith aspect, then it'll trump all of these issues. But that's when I think we need to remember that our church is not just a safe haven for Malayali cultural activities, right? It's also to instill faith in people, right? These are all sinners coming to church for their salvation, like for, right? So I think the faith aspect, if that is a priority, and then as well as educating kids on what this church is, don't shy from it, right? Like don't hide the fact that you're Syrian or Catholic or you're this kind of like whatever. Like you shouldn't hide from that. You should be proud of that, because it's a really unique experience to be in America, and just like being being brown, being Indian in America, like just like that, our faith is a very unique experience. So we should be proud in that, and educate our kids, as well as be open to change, be open to cultural change, I would say.
I sit in the balcony of my church like every week, and every week our like secretary will ask like, "Hey, are there any guests in the church?" I love, it's my favorite question. And the second someone stands up, every uncle and auntie and child on the balcony is looking over the balcony to see who's there. And I think it's hilarious because it doesn't matter if they're not looking like us or if they look exactly like us. Everyone's going to stare just because it's someone that's outside of our community. And if it stopped there, it would have been, that becomes an issue. But I think one thing I've gotten to see in our churches typically is like, it doesn't stop there. There is a desire to know who that is and welcome them into the community in some sort of way, to have them join for fellowship in way. I like the concept of homogeneity, because it is like one thing that I've noticed in our church, especially over the last 4 or 5 years, is we've had a lot of folks, that have come here and they don't speak Malayalam. They'll speak Hindi or Kannada or Tamil or another language, and even that's a little bit outside of the identity of the typical Malayali Christian church. And if they don't know Malayalam, that already separates them. But they're still very much brought into the community in the same way, and it shows that the cross that's at the middle is what matters. And it's just something that I hope to continue seeing grow, even outside of the folks that look like us.
Yeah.
One of the things like I tell my students is like, I make a joke, I'm like, spoiler alert, like Jesus was in Malu, right? If he came to our church, would we be like, what are you doing here? Yeah. Like, get out of here, right? Like, how ridiculous would that sound? So something that my church does to break that bubble is we take our students on field trips. So we expose them to Christianity outside of this cultural experience. So my students have been to the Egyptian churches, Armenian churches, recently Ethiopian churches, and it's so beautiful when we go to these churches. Like, you'll see these little kids come up and they're like, what is this Indian person doing here? So it's like, it's also for them as well. Like, we're taking up space, we're like coming in, we're like, oh yeah, we're here too. And I think that's part of the real work that needs to be done, is like exposing people, and in ways that it might be hard to be like, hey, everyone start coming here right now, but in small ways, give them small doses what they can handle at that point. So that's something that we've done. So I think that's a really good step. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. I've seen in my church, whenever there's a non-Indian come, it's just so good to invite them into that culture, if that makes sense. Like, because they don't know. And so I feel like if it's just on Sundays, they're seeing everything, but no one's creating conversation or even explaining things, then they're going to leave confused and not feel welcomed at all. But I feel like I've seen non-Indians continuously come back to our church because we don't just see them on Sundays. We'll hang out during the week. They'll come to Bible study. They'll come to young adults, and they end up loving the culture. And I think it's really sweet whenever I do tell my coworkers, oh, I go to Indian church. They're like, wow, there's a whole Indian church? And I'm like, oh, there's actually so many. And then they get excited to hear about it, and they also want to come. So I feel like just talking about it, and like how you said, like being proud of it. And it's like, yes, like I grew up Malayali. I grew up in this Indian church. Let me tell you about it. So yeah, I've seen just welcoming and explaining your culture helps a lot.
I think it's a very shared experience of everyone just turning behind and who's that stranger? And then I love it because Achin's like, oh, please stand up. And then there's also like even a transition, or I can see someone new and he's like, maybe make the homily more in English or less Malayalam all of a sudden. Maybe make a tubda like that, or switching back and forth. And I think even that is a start in the right direction, because you're trying to, accommodate for everyone. And being Catholic means it's the universal church. It is part of much more than just Indian or whatever, right? And so I think I'm starting to fall in love with that fact that it is such a universal church that I can go anywhere, and whatever happens in the future, I will be fine because I have God, I have faith, and I have a church somewhere. And I think just bringing that closer, and like Christina said, faith, being rooted in those basic principles is what matters the most. And being Indian and being traditional and being cultural comes next. And that fortunately comes for us in our church.
Yeah. That's awesome. I love that you guys are seeing the potential blessings in it. That it's honestly really good to hear that it's not like it's a really bad experience for when anyone new comes in. Because I mean, I'm always a visitor at everyone's church. I'll go in, I'm like, all right, yeah, I'm Alex from Colorado. But I've taken friends with me, and we've had good experiences, we've had bad experiences. And it's been interesting to see, because I did not grow up with a lot of Indian friends. And so when I've taken friends of mine that aren't Indian to an Indian church, unfortunately, there's always a lot of stares and just like bad looks. So I say that to tell you that I'm glad to hear that from your perspective that there's more willingness from you all, because you all probably grew up similar to me, that you have friends that are not speaking Malayalam every day.
I mean, I think we can admit that there are issues, right? Meaning we do have positive experiences, but there also are negative experiences. We're Malayali, right? So you all know how like Malayali parents can be,
Intrinsic thoughts.
Yeah, and you also know how we can become cliquey. Like, you find a Malayali, and with our generation, you kind of see like, oh, we're kind of like, we're from the same place, But like, I guess we get to make a choice, which we can find beauty in being from the same place, and see that as like an addition to our life, right? Like, it makes our life more beautiful. Whereas like some people in our community can find Malayali as being like the best, or like this is the pinnacle, like this is what we should strive, this is what we should keep and maintain. But the reality is, just like how our culture is beautiful and our us being Malayali is beautiful, like other cultures and other ethnicities and all these things, they have their own beauty that can be brought to the church. Like our faith can be more beautiful and more exemplified through multiple cultures, right? So we should admit, right, like that Malayalis, we could do better with remembering the beauty in multiple cultures, not just our own.
I think that kind of feeds into something else I want to talk about, in the sense of we're all from similar areas in Kerala, and we're sitting here today, but we have people from Oriental Orthodox churches, Eastern Catholic, Margam Church, Eastern Catholic, and a Pentecostal church. And so from the outside, people may not understand how potentially ground shaking this could be, but these kind of things don't happen really ever. Maybe you've never met someone who goes to a Pentecostal church. Maybe you've never seen the inside of a Malankara Orthodox church. And so, of course, we're talking about their similarities and how we can see the future in a better light, but I think it's important to talk about like what are the highlights of your church and your denomination. And we don't have to talk about the historical reasons why this church isn't this and all. We'll get to that at a different time. But it's important to identify the uniqueness of our churches. So if you guys could just like give me like 15 seconds, this is the church I go to, here's what it is, to maybe someone who is Indian, like how would you explain it?
I can take a stab at that one. I feel like Jacobites are very layered. You have to kind of peel the onion a lot. So I think the summary that I would say is we're the church that falls under the Patriarchate of Antioch. So all of these Syriac Christian communities that come, and Thomas who came from that Aramaic-speaking world, and we even see in the Acts that the first church, they're first called Christians in Antioch. We're the church that adheres to that ecclesiology. And so if you go into church history and you talk about what happened when the Portuguese came, from our perspective, we say we're with Antioch. That's who we've known as far back as we can go, and that's what we try to adhere to and stick to today.
Yeah,
I'm gonna build off of that because it's so very similar. Syro-Malankara Catholic Church uses the Antioch liturgy as well, but the only big difference is that we had a reunion movement. In the historical books, that's what it's called. The reunion movement is what brought us back to the Catholic Church. And so the biggest difference of us is really that we fall under the Pope, so Pope Leo. And so many people don't know about us since we are still Catholic, but we're around. And that's the biggest thing is what Zebi said. So all of the liturgy from Antioch was adopted by us, and then we eventually branched out and rejoined.
Good explanation.
Yeah, I would say, just to branch off, Cyril brother right here, Cyril Malabar is similar in the fact that we are Catholic, but y'all are the Western, right? I would say, and we are the Eastern, right? I would say, and just like how we got our faith from Saint Thomas, and then y'all know how how the history goes, right? And I would say that for Cyril Malabar specifically, we have a unique experience with being closer to the Syriac liturgy and how that transformed into India and Indian culture, and how we exemplify a lot of our own, even like in the Cyril Malabar, the Kurushi, right? Like you see the cross, it has like the lotus and the Indian, and that's like a symbol of like India, right, and our culture. And so it's a unique experience. If you go to Kerala, right, you see so many Cyril Malabar churches, and yeah, I'm just happy that even within Catholicism, right, we have the beauty in the different rites, right, the Eastern rite, the Western rite, and how we're both Malayali, we're both Indian, but we can both see that beauty and be united. So really proud of that,
You need 5 minutes.
I probably need 5 seconds. I mean, I had to actually go back into my Sunday school book today.
I know.
To look, and I was like, oh, wow, this is going to be the question. Well,
Sorry.
no, you're good. I mean, the roots-wise, like, I think there's a lot of identity that falls under the same category, just like understanding where Marthoma roots come from. It was split off in the like early 1800s, but like so much of the culture and understanding is shared between our churches. And so when I'm looking back on what really differentiates our church or where our church kind of goes in a different way, I mean, we have different communions out there with other churches, but when I'm looking back on just our foundations and our books and understanding like what's different, there's just a large idea and spirit of reformation that happens within our church. And not only that, but always just being able to progress in a different way. On top of that, evangelism is just such a key, and ecumenism is a key part of our church's just foundations and principles. And that's something that's kept me in the church and kept me very active in the church. But it's also just been something that it's been a blessing to teach kids that the Spirit of God leads us in that way, and it's something our church is fully practicing. And so, yeah, it's what I teach the kids today.
Yeah.
I feel like you might explain the roots of Pentecostal churches better.
Well, I guess I can answer this from the place of before I knew anything about any of the Indian churches. Understanding Pentecostal churches is like, okay, these churches were in the early 1940s, and even prior to that, there's a Reformation that actually came in Kerala specifically from the Marthoma Church. The Marthoma Church essentially initiated open-air preaching, and this is the first time that the Bible is being preached publicly outside. And that actually initiated a movement which started this Pentecostal revival in Kerala, which a lot of people don't know that a lot of Pentecostal work came from the early days from the Marthoma Church. But yeah, I don't go to a Pentecostal church, but I think having been in many of them, there's a lot of misconceptions about what everything you guys are saying. And so I would love, if there are any questions or something that you would clear up, or if there's a question that you have for another person in the circle, honestly, on behalf of everyone who's watching, like, most people probably don't know about all of your churches. But yeah, is there a question that you would have, or is there something that you would want to clarify that people may have misconceptions, especially if you're Catholic, if you're Orthodox, like, is there anything that you would consider sharing or asking to someone here?
So on behalf of all Jacobites, I think the one thing I would say, it's hard to explain Jacobite because like that doesn't sound Christian at all. And the spiciest thing I'll say, which we might need to cut out, with the schism with Jacobite and Orthodox, what's so ironic is those adjectives describe both groups. They're both Jacobite and they're both Orthodox, which is why I've been using Orthodox so much, because when I am an Orthodox Christian, I just happen to be under this church history that more Jacob Bordeus, he preserves the church. So to be Jacobite is to be Orthodox. There's other things about this schism we don't need to get into right now, but that's the thing that I would say. It's like we're just the Syriac Orthodox Church in India, and we summarize that as being Jacobite.
Very concise.
Yeah.
I think like for I guess apostolic Christians, I think there's a idea that like maybe people think that the church and the Bible are like contradictory. I think how we would understand it is like the church is like, you know, like the church is the interpretive lens to understand it. So the tradition shouldn't be seen as something that we've made up. Ideally, it's the idea that the Holy Spirit guided the church. It would guide the church to all truth. And so that truth that we see in the early church is what we hope to continue. So it's not, we would say, some man-made traditions. These are things that the Spirit guided individuals, and our job is to not make something different.
Yeah.
So I think one thing a lot of apostolic Christians kind of get accused of. So I think that's something that I think would be important to.
I think that's a really helpful thing to offer. That's important.
Yeah, and then I guess Catholics and maybe kind of for you guys as well, Mary and the saints, the importance, why are they even like involved in our like faith journey, right? And I guess it was natural for me in my childhood to rely on the saints, rely on Mary, because I always saw them as like supportive roles in my faith journey to Christ, right? But I guess I didn't know there was a huge misunderstanding for what my faith was. And I guess the reality, or for what our faith is, right, is we believe that Mary and the saints are kind of like mature spiritual leaders, right? And they were humans on this earth, just like us, but they've suffered much for their faith, they've sacrificed much for their faith, and they've gone through many trials and tribulations just to be close to God. And I guess, I just would like to clarify that we do rely on Mary, we do rely on the saints, we do rely on the early church, the fathers that kind of led the way. We do rely on their interpretation and their voice on a lot of things because, I am just a man, right? I'm just a human on this earth. I need to rely on. I can't just rely on my own interpretation or my own understanding, right? Jesus suffered and died, right? 2,000 years ago, right? What happened in those 2,000 years, right? Was it just me and me and my family, or was there generations of people that also fought and struggled for their faith, right? So I just would like to clarify, right?
Yeah.
Mary and the saints.
Always the.
I mean, for me, before I even went to a Catholic or Orthodox church, I had a lot of apprehension. I had no idea, one, what to do when I walk into a Catholic or Orthodox church, and secondly, I had no idea really anything about intercession from the saints and all the different kind of negative things I had heard about, they worship this, they do that. But I really appreciate what you said, Chris, it's the lens that it's essentially coinciding. And I think it's important to highlight that we can have differences, and we should have differences. That's how God made us, is to be different. But it doesn't have to separate us. And so the final kind of closing idea that I want to really highlight on, specifically here in Dallas, is the concept of ecumenism, the concept of linking arms with other churches and brothers and sisters in Christ. What do you guys think that could look like in this city? Obviously, there's a lot of Indian Christians, a lot of Malayali churches. Is there a world where there's some sense of unity? And it doesn't have to be everyone's worshiping the same. Like, the churches don't need to look the same. But here we are sitting together. Is there a world where more things like this can happen, where there's more community with other people who don't sing the same songs or chant the same hymns as you? Like, is that possible in Dallas? Is that possible for the greater Malayali Christian diaspora across the globe?
I've gotten to see seeds of it all over my life. Growing up, I have family, my cousins I have that are, some are Orthodox, some are Pentecostals. So I got to grow up in like going to VBS at Orthodox Church and going to VBS at Pentecostal Church and then going to VBS at Margam Church. So it was a fun summer. But it was just beautiful because I think I got to grow up and understanding like the friends that I made at Pentecostal Church, those are brothers. And friends I made at Orthodox Church, like those are brothers. And the ones at Margam Church, those are my brothers, right? And it's just what kind of a beautiful thing to know, like I can grow up over time and still consider them like as, you know, workers in Christ alongside with me, brothers in Christ that are alongside with me. They're doing their thing at their church, I'm doing my thing at our church, but like we still share the same love of God. And then I'm also got to see that like during college as well, like, you know, do programs such as like InterVarsity or Crew or any of the, or NAVs or any of these bigger organizations that do it, they do a great job just being able to bring people together at least of different faiths and still centered on who Christ is. And that, if that doesn't show like just what a seed of hope looks like, I think then we got some more work to do.
Yeah.
At our church right now, like we, as cliche as it is, we play a lot of basketball, and sports is actually some ministry that we've used as a vehicle for ecumenism recently. We host a league where we're bringing like different you know, denominations together, and our goal is just to always start with a devotion that's focused on the word. And we're all sharing the same word at that point and listening to the same scripture, but we're also all on different teams in, you know, because we're in different jerseys, but we're also on one team because, you know, it's
Yeah.
Christ, so.
Yeah.
I think, Jeevan, you mentioned a really great point about seeds, and I think there are plenty of seeds out here right now that we've all have, like playing basketball, like play basketball, play volleyball, all that stuff is already there. And I think even in our parents' generation, like we have different communities, like World Malayali Association or whatever that we have. So in a hub like Dallas, I think we are already so many steps ahead in many different ways. And I think maybe it was a couple of years back, my church, we actually organized a flag football tournament. So I don't know if you guys heard about that, but those are the steps. And I think if we as like our generation and our youth now go that extra step and say, okay, instead of having maybe sports or whatever, we can start looking to these churches, going to these churches for support for a community. And so I think it's there. I just think it starts with us to go the next step. And whatever that looks like, it's up to us.
I think, you know, we leverage our Malayali network so strongly in other aspects of our life, like professionally, like, you know, your mom might work with another mom. It's like, oh, she can get you a job over there or whatever, or Chach and Chichi, whatever it is. And then romantically, it's like, I know this person's single at this church and stuff like that, but we're more hesitant to do it with faith or even serving our communities. And I think that's really where we can lean into this because at the end of the day, we want to make our community safer, better, bring more people to Jesus. And there are ways to partner that we can do that, really, I think, service-oriented ways that it doesn't matter necessarily our doctrinal differences. That can all iron itself out later. But in terms of just going and doing good and being good stewards of our faith and for the community, those are the areas that, especially this generation, which is more connected than our parents, I think we can do a better job of that. That's really where we should focus.
Yeah.
I would say ecumenism. I even struggle to say the word. Like it's not. It's. I think I've heard the word when we talk about our. I think maybe y'all's families are involved. If your parents sing or anything, there's like an ecumenical Christmas singing something. I don't know. That's the only time I hear that word, right? I think Dallas, we have so many Malayalis. We have so many Christians. That it's super easy for us to get stuck in our get comfortable in our own little little areas, denominations, what are churches, right? But genuinely, like right now with our four or five denominations, if we like all met up and just fundraised for something, or like you guys, we have so much like influence network. Yeah, we have so much influence, and like the network that we have, like we could do some crazy good if we were all united in America, just as like Indian Christians, right? But like further than Indian Christians, right? Just as like Christians, right? Like people can see the love and the support that we have. Like I know we all probably have like non-Indian friends that are Christian, but you know their walk may look completely different than ours, because as Malayalis, it's kind of ingrained that we support each other. You know, like if you're from the same place in India, you know you guys are like brothers at this point. Like as Malayalis, we have a great community and we have a lot of love, and I think like we need to start sharing that to the greater community, like the greater Dallas non-Malayali community, even past Christians. We could do that, right? So instead of getting stuck in our denominations, like if we genuinely either did something together for Dallas, like just, you know, we could do it. We have that power and that influence. And then most importantly, we have like a united faith, right? So we could do it, right?
Really good point.
It is a reality that we could have in Dallas.
Yeah.
So.
I feel like it's what brings unity too is everyone having the Lord at the center and also trying to be more like Jesus. Like it actually is like, okay, I'm going to be humble like the Lord. And I will be humble going into conversations, being open to conversations. And like you said, like it's okay if there's differences, but I'm open to learn. I'm open to be sharpened. And so I think like humility, serving each other, the way Jesus did, like I'm going to serve you and not expect anything back. It's like an unconditional love. So I think just the more that we keep God at the center, there will be unity. But if it's through like culture or music or like events, I don't see it being sustainable or happening. But if it's actually like everyone trying to be more like the Lord and love each other, serve each other in humility, I see it happening.
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone covered all the bases. We have a lot more that unites us than divides us. One of the stories I always think about my own ecumenical experience, we had like a Orthodox Christian Awareness Day, and one of my best friends is Catholic. So we were just sitting together, and we normally debate theology, and I remember someone coming up to us, and they were like, "Why do you think Jesus is God?" And in that moment, both our eyes are like, "Okay, let's talk." So it's like, you're united, and it's like
That's cool.
Satan wants to divide, right? It's easier to divide, right? But if you realize, like, oh no, we actually have a lot in common that, like, we have so much in common that allows us to even have these. But there's some people who the differences are so big we can't even have these fights and these disputes with. And so that was an eye-opening experience for me. I was like, oh shoot, like there's a whole world out there that we don't have unity with in the same way that that we need to remember what we have in common, and which is Christ.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's funny that all of us have heard the phrase "not to Levrea," and every Malayali Christian is from a very small place in India. Kerala is very small compared to other places in India. But especially here in the US, a lot of us are from neighboring villages, neighboring districts. And not to say that they're all united there, but I think especially when we're here, it could be powerful to see more, like you're saying, that would bring us together rather than separate us. And again, like you said, Chris, like the enemy wants to see Christians divided. And for many, many, many generations in our communities, we've seen so much division that it's broken apart families, it's broken apart traditions from each other. And we're not here to solve all those issues, but I truly believe that if we want to see something change, that we have to implement it. And so I'm encouraged just to see what's happening here in Dallas, that of course there's more work to be done, there's more work to be done everywhere. But I really do believe that sometime in our generation we'll see some sense of the needle being moved in the right direction of We don't have to look at the other denomination and think they're going to hell. We can actually believe the best in them because that's how the Lord would see them. So Jesus looks at those people at a different church, in a different tradition. Jesus still looks at them and he loves them, and he died for them just the same as he died for us and our church. Yeah, is there any last comments, questions, remarks?
I think this was really cool. Yeah. First of its kind, maybe.
Yeah, I think, my hope is that we see more things like this, that there's other initiatives, other people in our community that are rising up to take charge and to lead the next generation. I'm honored that you guys were a part of the first ever interdenominational. Yeah, exactly. Oh man, well, yeah, I think that's a wrap. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching this video. If you want to see more videos like this, please like and subscribe and comment below.